Hey everyone, Brandon here with the Boonville Fire Department. In the month of May, we are kicking off a apparatus and equipment showcase where each week we will do one or two video walk-arounds of a couple of our apparatus each week to go through a detailed review of what the apparatus is, what its role is in our department, and what equipment it carries and how that helps fulfill that apparatus's role in our department. So a lot of people in the community don't realize why our department and many others have so many different trucks, why we have so many different types of trucks, and why you see so many trucks responding to various emergencies in the community. So that is one goal in this series, is to help everyone understand better how the organization here works and how our fleet of 8 trucks comes together to make us an overall successful operation. So the Boonville Fire Department has a fleet of 8 apparatus, 7 of which are housed here at our main station in town, with the 8th being housed at our substation in the southwest portion of our district. So again, the goal of this series is to go over what each apparatus is, what its specific role is, and how this all comes together at the end of the day to make us a successful fire department. In the broad sense of things, though, the reason that we have so many trucks at this department, just like every other fire department in this county or a similar county where we see both small to medium-sized towns plus rural areas outside of those town limits, a lot of things are driven by the types of buildings, the size of buildings, both residential and commercial, but also it is driven by our water supply needs or lackings in water supply as far as outside of the towns where we don't have municipal water in most cases. Most people are aware that in Yadkin County there are very few places beyond the towns that you see here that have hydrants, fire hydrants, supplied from the town. That makes us rely on rural water sources such as ponds and creeks, and we have to have specialized equipment and apparatus to get water from those sources and haul them to and from the fill-up location to the fire scene. And that job specifically is where our tankers, for example, come into play. But then we have people that will sometimes ask, well, why does Boonville, a very small town without tall buildings, for example, need a ladder truck? It's a valid question, and that is something we'll get into at the week or the day that we do the walk around and discussion on the ladder truck. But the point is that our fleet, as well as so many others, are by some considered to be large for a small town, small community, because we have various needs throughout the district that we really can't meet with just one truck. On top of that, we get into a little bit more technical things as far as our ISO rating, or the rating that drives property insurance rates here in the county and in our district specifically, where at the moment we maintain an ISO Class 3 rating, which is a very, very good rating. That rating applies to the entire fire district, whereas prior to our last assessment by the Department of Insurance, we had a split grade of a 5.9. So in town it was a grade 5, which is pretty decent, and outside the town, however, it was a 9, which is almost the worst rating that you could have. And that was totally common across the entire county until the last decade roughly, when it became a bigger push to improve those grades by all departments here. A Class 9 in the rural areas outside the towns was pretty much what everyone had. In the time since then, we've been able to improve both our equipment, the apparatus, our staffing, a lot of other things, rural water locations, as we discussed, with ponds and creeks, getting those established and accessible by our fire trucks. All of that has played into this grade improvement for here, as well as pretty much every other department in this county has dramatically improved in their DOI grades. So that is why us and all other departments have so many different trucks, is because there are a lot of needs that there's not a way to really build one or two trucks to meet all those needs and reduce our fleet size. So with all the background information of what this series is about, the purpose of it, we're going to jump into day one, week one of our apparatus review series, and kicking it off is the most common fire truck, I guess we'll call it, that people are familiar with, what people might refer to as a fire engine, and that is an engine company, which here today we are looking at engine 13. So bear with me as we go through this. This is, again, our first day trying this out, and as luck would have it, I'm working by myself today, whereas normally we've got 2 or 3 people here working throughout the day, but staffing today, it's just me. So I'll have to do a little bit of talking and some camera work as well. All right, guys, we are looking at engine company 13. It is a 2008 Pierce Contender with a 1,000 gallon onboard water tank and a 1,500 gallon per minute fire pump. It is a top mount style pump, where up on the catwalk here, the controls for the driver operator to run the pump, get water on the various hose lines, and to get water in from a hydrant or from another truck. The controls for that are here up top, as compared to on the Squad, you'll see at a later date, as a side mount style pump. So in terms of an engine company, the main job of any fire engine or engine company is to simply get water onto a fire. Whether that is a building or structure, vehicle, or some other type of fire, the main goal of any engine at its foundation is to get water on a fire as quickly as possible and to get a water supply established and sustain that water until the incident is brought under control. So the majority of the equipment on this truck is geared towards fire suppression. The fire department obviously does rescue work and hazardous materials type emergencies, as well as medical emergencies. However, the majority of stuff on this truck is specifically to assist in a fire, especially a structure fire. So we've got our hose lines, cross lays here at 200 feet long, 1 3/4 size, an additional 200 foot 1 3/4 on the front of the truck, and then working our way around to the rear, we have a 200 foot 2.5, which we would pull that line for a larger well-involved fire or a large building. That's going to give us more gallons of water per minute in flow compared to the 1 3/4. And then if some longer length of hose is needed, the hose here in total is 300 feet. It's actually 200 feet of 2.5 to a gated Y or a split adapter that converts to a 1 3/4. That's an additional 100 feet long, and then a second 1 3/4 bundle could be added to the second side of that Y to have a backup on that. And of course, as you see, we have extra hose bundles here in this compartment to lengthen out those hose lengths should we need the additional length for something like a chicken house or a building that sits very far back off the road or off the driveway. However, most buildings that we respond to can fortunately be reached and gone through with a 200-foot pre-connected hose, which is pretty standard in this county and most organizations, but 200 feet's a pretty common length to start with. So engine 13, as you can see, is a 4-door cab truck. It is what we would call a custom cab style truck, in that the cab and the chassis, the truck itself, was spec'd new to our parameters, to our design, based on the needs that we as an organization have in the fire department. So again, that was done in 2008, and that is one unique thing to this truck compared to almost the rest of our fleet, with the exception of a truck that is now serving as a reserve pumper tanker. Every other truck in our fleet currently was not purchased new from the manufacturer. They were purchased used from other departments, which we will discuss at in a later video, the advantages and disadvantages to that. But the main advantage to a new truck, purchased new by our department like this, is it can be catered to the specific needs that we would have. So starting out as an example with that, you'll see that in this 4-door style cab, where it is pretty common, not exclusive, but rather common to have 6 or more seats in the cab overall, we only have 4. The reason for that is, being a combination style fire department where we have volunteers and paid employees, mostly, of course, being a volunteer organization, we don't typically have more than 1 or 2 people in these trucks at any given time. Looking at our daytime staffing, where our part-time employees are supplementing the hours that our volunteer members, at least the majority of them, are at their own jobs and otherwise unavailable to respond to emergencies, that is why we have a part-time program to begin with. But we have normally 2 or 3 part-time employees here per day on weekdays, and each one of those, however, are going to function as a driver for one of our various trucks. So it is not common for all or a couple of them to be in any one truck, and that is because the majority of the incidents that we respond to, especially in terms of fire, rescue, hazmat, stuff like that, is going to require more than one truck to respond. So thinking in terms of a building fire as an example real quick, again, we have to have the engine there to get the initial and water on the fire throughout the incident, but we only have so much water on board. So if we respond to a fire here in town, the squad, for example, would come in second to catch a fire hydrant, establish that water supply, and then relay pump that water to engine 13. And then the ladder truck would then come in to provide additional equipment that is too large or otherwise can't be carried on the engine or the squad due to limited storage space. Take that same scenario out in the county or in the rural part of our community. The squad would be replaced by the tanker that has a much larger volume of onboard water in its onboard tank, and that is how water supply is established in our rural areas. But because we have to have at least 3 trucks on any fire in our district, we have to have 3 drivers, and so our part-time employees and even our initial responding volunteers that would respond here to the station from their home or wherever they are in the community, they would respond here and normally be by themselves as the driver in the truck. Now, in terms of volunteer response, occasionally you'll have more than one volunteer arrive here at the station, or we have some volunteers who have not yet been cleared in our driver process. That is the times you would see someone riding in the passenger seat or sometimes in the back of the truck. But regardless of our limited staffing and the likelihood of these seats being filled, it is a good advantage, because when we have scheduled trainings or times that we do want to travel multiple people, be it a company transfer where we're filling in at a different station to cover their district or other times we have some somewhat advanced notice, we can send more people in one truck versus making them travel in their personal vehicles, which is much safer. So, the other big advantage for us on the custom cab, however, is the storage space. So, compared to a conventional cab truck or a two-door style truck, you have tremendously less storage space for things like your flashlights, gas meters, our air packs, which you see are in the actual seats on this truck, whereas on the conventional cab style trucks you'll see on a later video, the air packs are in the compartments on the truck body, and that reduces the overall storage space we have for other priority equipment. So the custom cab chassis allow for air pack seats and storage of the air packs and so much more inside the cab. Again, we mentioned this is a four-seater four-door cab rather than 6 or 8. And in place of what would be 2 forward-facing seats here, we actually have our medical compartment to keep our medical bag, AED, medical PPE, gloves, and things like that for when this truck does go to EMS or first responder type calls. So that is a good look inside the cab of engine 13 as our primary engine, and you'll get to see a comparison to how much less space you have in one of the conventional cab trucks in a later video. One thing I've not mentioned on this truck, the fact that it was purchased new, obviously it's a little bit more costly to purchase a new truck compared to a used truck, but luckily in 2008 or leading up to 2008, the department was awarded a federal grant to cover a large portion of that cost. So that saved us from having to bear the burden, so to speak, of the full cost, which back then was a little over $400,000. You look at that same truck today, if this truck were to be spec'd and built today in 2024, we would be looking at well over $600,000 for an engine company. So again, in assisting with fireground operations for fire suppression, most of the stuff you'll see here as we pass by on a 360 walk around is fire suppression driven. So in the first compartment or the driver's or engineer's compartment, we have things like extra nozzles, adapters for connecting various size hoses, scene control stuff like fire line tape, some power tools, and some different adapters and things like that. Again, we have 2 air packs in this compartment because we only have the 4 seats and not 6, so they have to be stored here. But if you could imagine, if we didn't have that custom cab and the air pack seats, somewhere along this whole side here would be additional air packs, and that would cut into the storage space for the other stuff you see here. So we have some hand tools for helping with forcible entry, getting inside of a building up top there. The extra hose packs we've talked about, and then down below we have our chainsaws. Most of those are used for ventilation or forcible entry, whether it's commercial or residential, forcing doors open, cutting windows, doors out, cutting off security bars, things like that is where those saws come into play. And we also have the tree saw there we use for clearing down trees in the roadway if we have a storm or something like that. Even though this is an engine company, one unique feature to it that is not standard, we'll say, is it is also a small tanker. That square chute you see right there can be extended out, and that door can be opened from that valve, and that dumps the onboard water tank out, and we could dump that into a drop tank, which you'll see on the tanker video in the future. And a drop tank is basically a portable folding swimming pool that holds extra water that can then be drafted or suctioned up by a fire truck to supply to another fire truck is typically kind of how that works. So this engine can serve as a small tanker with that configuration. You didn't see our electrical reels up top there on either side. That's supplied by the onboard PTO generator, so we don't have to have a small gas-powered portable generator. That is an onboard feature of the truck. Our ground ladders are back here, primarily using those, of course, to access upper floors, upper windows, to make access or rescue potential victims, and also to access the roof for addressing vertical ventilation needs, where we would open up the roof, cut a hole with a saw or other hand tools to remove smoke, heat, gases, and things like that. We then have our electric fan down below for assisting in smoke removal from a building. Salvage covers to cover up belongings inside of a building where we're doing overhaul after the fire is mainly knocked down. We're trying to preserve property and not damage more than we have to overhaul the building. We'll try and cover things up with tarps to keep them from getting water damage and stuff like that. We then have some stuff up here to address chimney fires. If a flue is clogged or has creosote buildup that catches fire, the stuff in those couple bags there assist us in getting those extinguished. We then have our hand tools down below. For the most part, these are for forcible entry, again, popping open doors, windows, and getting us a way inside of a building. Even if it is locked or whatever, we can use these various tools to get inside. And then the ones up top are mainly for, again, overhaul, trying to open up floors, ceilings, walls, things like that to check for hidden pockets of fire, smoldering fires, and things like that. And then our last compartment has our rapid intervention or RIT equipment inside of it. That is equipment designed to go in and find and package a downed or trapped firefighter. So if someone or one of our firefighters runs out of air, or is low on air, is trapped, disoriented, or can't find their way out, if something falls on them or they fall into a hole, this has a large tank with extra air inside of it we can hook them up to, has a spare mask, spare regulator, and then we have extra search ropes up top here to guide our way in and guide our way back out when trying to find and remove a downed firefighter. And then down below we have some hazmat equipment. That's mainly some absorbent pads and booms and oil dry to prevent spilled chemicals, fuels, and stuff like that from accessing the storm drains and our waterways, to try and keep all that nice and clean. And then this device is something we use to make foam, firefighting foam, to help smother fires during overhaul, or to make foam blankets, for example, to cover up fuels and other things that may pose a flash risk on a fuel spill or other chemical spill, is where that foam blanket would be beneficial. And then the opposite side of the rear cab is very similar. Additional air pack seat, additional hand tools, and our water can extinguisher are on this side. And our radios are also carried inside the cab, which is nice as well. When we do have people riding, whether shotgun or in the back, the driver typically is not dressed out in their turnout gear, but anybody riding passenger in the truck, typically they would be dressed out already in their turnout gear. And the great thing about that, from a time-saving perspective, because seconds do count in the job that we do, when they step off this truck, they're already in their gear, the air pack is on their back, they can step off, grab a hose line, grab a tool, and already get to work without having to arrive and then dress out and then get an air pack. That can already be done from the time they leave the building. So that is our walk around and description of Engine 13, the function of an engine company within our organization, some of the tools it carries, and things like that. Again, the goal of this series is to educate everyone on not only the trucks and what they do and why we have so many and how they overall function on the fireground, but to also explain some of the challenges that we face being a mainly volunteer organization. Again, even though this truck carries up to 4 people, the reality is our staffing, day in, day out, you're going to see one person on this truck, and that's the driver. If we're fortunate, maybe 2 or 3, but that is, frankly, a rare thing for us. Our members, majority of the time, are responding from home or elsewhere, and you'll see them respond in their personal vehicles, either straight to the fire scene or occasionally here to the fire station. Of course, weekends and outside the time we have part-time employees, our members know, especially those that are drivers, to respond here to the station to get a truck. So that's kind of how our response model in a nutshell works. And then our goal is to get the minimum number of trucks that we need, that being 3 for a structure fire in our district, not only for practical, real-world need, but also that plays into our insurance rating, which drives property insurance premium costs throughout the district. So we are a ISO Class 3 organization, which is fantastic. That is a huge cost saver in terms of everyone's insurance rates that live in our fire district, and that is afforded to us based on the apparatus, equipment that we carry, our staffing, the amount of volunteers and people that we're capable of putting onto a fire scene on average. It's also based on our water supply, both municipal and rural, to include our water points at ponds and creeks. It's based on our training hours and many, many, many other factors that are assessed by the Department of Insurance to determine that grade, which gets done around every 5 years. So where we were previously a Class 5-9 split, we are now a district-wide Class 3, which is fantastic. That is among some of the best in the entire nation. Only a small percentage of organizations, and frankly, very few the size of ours that covers such a large rural territory as we do, where water supply is very challenging and one of the most critical factors in that grade, and real world problems being rural water. So to have a Class 3 in a small community such as this is fantastic and speaks volumes to our members and what they are able to accomplish day in, day out. And again, the majority of those being volunteers receiving no compensation for what they do. And they do it because they love it, and I want to thank them for all that they do. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this series. I hope it's interesting. We think it's something that some folks would like. We've never done it before, obviously, and just hope it sheds some light on what we do, how we operate, and how everything comes together, usually to make us a successful fire department to serve you guys. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you on the next video, which will be the video for Squad 13. Thanks. See you.